Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today we're going to be diving into my top 10 list of things that I think that you need to know before diving into Predecessor Early Access. So first and foremost, drop a like on this video, subscribe to this channel for future Predecessor content, and let's go ahead and dive into it. So some of these things on this list are specific to Predecessor, some are a little bit more general for MOBAs, but either way, if you're diving into Predecessor, I think that you should know these things, and let's go ahead and get into it. This list isn't in any particular order, but I wrote down 10 things. Let's have it. All right, number one is CRESTS and knowing how they work. So when you pick your hero and you load into the map, the first thing you're going to be met with is the ability to select a crest. Now the crest is it's a passive item that you can evolve into a secondary crest, which will increase the efficacy or the effect of that passive, and then eventually you can evolve that second crest into one of 3 legendary items. And these items are going to be your active items. They all have different cooldowns, different stats, and different actives. So essentially, over time, as we play the game, as you learn your heroes and which of these items that you like, you're going to be building these crests into those items and into the preference that you want. This may be used for counter building, for picking one that's more effective against your lane matchup or your enemy team composition. But essentially, you just need to know that you're going to be building this crest and doing the kind of mission / quest that comes along with it in order to upgrade it. So they're pretty simple. It's in-game things that are going to happen over time. You can kind of focus it. Some of them are like healing yourself by hitting enemies or monsters. Really simple things like that in order to upgrade the crest. Now, the reason I put this one on the list is because when I first played Predecessor, I was pretty confused. I didn't really understand how it worked. But essentially, the crests are passives that you have to kind of do a mission for in order to upgrade, and then you will be able to select a legendary item. Now, when the UI of the crest is kind of like lit up, that means that it's essentially done and you can go back to base and select your legendary item. All right, number 2 on the list is for junglers specifically. This is about Hunt and Wild Hunt. This is the jungle item. So when you're the jungler, you get Hunt. It's this dagger, has a passive. When you're a laner, you get a refillable potion. So 4 players on each team are going to have refillable potions, whereas the jungler is going to have the Hunt dagger. Now, Hunt has a passive. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially just makes you stronger in the jungle. And then it has an active, which is to deal 502 damage to an enemy minion or monster. This is your jungle smite. This is your execute. This is how you do that, the last hitting of objectives. This is very important if you're from other MOBAs or if you understand the importance of last hitting objectives. Now, the Hunt dagger actually also has a kind of mission to it, and this is why it's important for junglers to make sure that they're also farming their jungle enough, is that you need to kill essentially 40 monsters in the jungle in order to upgrade Hunt to Wild Hunt, and that's going to increase the true damage smite from 500 damage to 1,000. So it's important that junglers understand this item. They can use it for last hitting objectives, use it for last hitting jungle, and then eventually upgrade it to be stronger. All right, number 3 on the list is FANGTOOTH. Now, FANGTOOTH is your big, first big, kind of jungle objective. It's the, one of the in the jungle bosses. And I want you to understand how important this actually is. FANGTOOTH has a stacking buff, and it will actually get stronger and stronger and become permanent. These buffs are permanent based on how many FANGTOOTH your team has. So FANGTOOTH is going to give you increased stats. I don't exactly know what everything that it does, but I know that it gives increased buff duration. I think that the second one is out of combat move speed, and then for FANGTOOTHs 3, 4, 5, and 6, you're going to just be increasing your stats. And so essentially, if your team is at 1 FANGTOOTH and they're at 1 FANGTOOTH, y'all are both getting the same buff. It's when a team starts taking multiple FANGTOOTHs that they start getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so it's really important to know that FANGTOOTH will stack up to 6 times, and controlling FANGTOOTH is going to be a massive part of Predecessor. Keeping vision, having junglers rotating around it, making sure the duo lane is capable of potentially winning a fight in their lane and then rotating over to FANGTOOTH. FANGTOOTH is huge. That's pretty much the way I'm putting it. So understanding how the FANGTOOTH buff works is important to know that it does stack, but most importantly, it's just knowing that FANGTOOTH is that important. All right, number 4 is all map buffs and camps. So this is really important just because I want you to understand all of what the map has to offer. So first and foremost, you have your red buff. This does damage over time damage and slow on basic attacks, and this is also for including it with cleave abilities. The blue buff is mana regen, ability haste or cooldown reduction, and extra ability damage to minion and monsters. The gold buff in the duo lane is additional gold. The green buff in the solo lane is gold, experience, mana, and health regen. FANGTOOTH, of course, is the stacking buffs that we talked about. The mini prime, it is only for the person that last hits it, and it increases your armor and your damage. For the big prime or the orb prime, I believe it makes you have increased damage and out of combat healing while also increasing the strength of your wave. And then you have the mid-map buffs, which are like the river buffs, like really close to the mid lane, and it's like these little bugs, and there's like 4 different ones. I think that they respawn randomly. I'm not 100% sure. They do give mana regen, and then there's 4 different kinds, so they all give mana regen. The pink one will give ability damage, the green will give a shield, the orange one will give attack speed, and the white one or the gray one will give additional movement speed. So yeah, those are like the majority of the map, the camps that actually have buffs on them, and then the rest of the camps in the jungle are just additional experience. All right, number 5 is warding and don't tunnel vision. Now this is a kind of like a tip and also just more MOBA knowledge. For laners, you're gonna have wards. Make sure that you are warding inside the jungle. Make sure that you're warding off chokes where you think that people might come behind you or come, you know, laterally down into your lane, and just controlling vision. Make sure that you are consistently trying to control vision as much as possible. And the reason why I put don't tunnel vision on my notes is because I have been personally finding with a third person MOBA that it's very easy to fight and look at what's right in front of you. You know, with other MOBAs that I've played, I feel like it's a little bit easier to look over at the map. You have a top-down view of yourself, and you can kind of gain some decent information while just looking at the game, and then you can get a little bit more by looking at the map. Now, with Predecessor, I find myself getting a lot more tunnel vision and locked in on the fight I'm taking, the last hitting that I'm doing, the poking, the trading, the farming, and I don't really look at my map too much. So make sure that you're keeping good vision, but with keeping good vision with warding, you also have to be looking at the map. So I do think that that's really important, and kind of MOBA knowledge in general, but a little bit specific to Predecessor. All right, number 6 is inhibitors do respawn. Now, as of the last test, and I don't think this is going to change for early access, the inhibitor respawns didn't show their respawn timer. It's a thing that we gave them feedback on. They definitely know that they need to implement that, but respawns for inhibitors is 5 minutes. So when your inhibitor is down, your team will most likely be turtling a little bit and kind of playing defensive, and just know that the inhibitors will respawn after 5 minutes. All right, number 7 is how to last hit minions. This one's really easy. The bar on the minion's health bar is orange, and it's going to kind of tick down as it's taking damage, as you're doing damage, and when that bar actually turns red, you can last hit. Now, if you're like a mage or a caster, you may not be putting out that much auto attack damage or physical damage, so you might have to, depending on how the last hitting is clumping out, you know, how the damage is being taken on a particular minion, you may have to couple in an ability. But yeah, last hitting, essentially, if you're looking for the auto attack last hit, is whenever it's going to be red, and you can also last hit with an ability as well, or you can damage spike like a pack, you know, throw a big AoE ability on it, get them low, and then, you know, last hit some of them with your autos or with another ability. So yeah, last hitting in this game has a visual representation, so definitely watch out for that. Whenever the minion's health bar gets red, you can last hit it. All right, number 8. Don't be afraid to auto buy items early on. Now, this one is more of like a general tip for just getting into a newer MOBA. I'm personally going to try to learn these items as fast as possible and create my own builds and build paths. But if you're really new to MOBA building, if you're really new to Predecessor, it can be a little overwhelming, right? You're going to be learning your kit, you're going to be learning the mechanics of the game, you're going to be learning about, you know, map control and all these things. So don't feel like you have to shy away from recommended items. Don't be afraid to leave on the auto buy and just let that happen for a while, and then you can learn how to build later on. Now, for me, item building, a lot of it is about counter building, who's strong on the enemy team, you know, building defenses accordingly, but also finding like a good, like optimal build path for your own damage. So, you know, let that come with time. But I just want to say that if you are getting into Predecessor, don't be afraid to lean into that auto buy for a little while. All right, number 9 is the roles, the lane meta. This is really obvious, and you're going to kind of like find this out in game first. You will really understand this simply, but I figured I'd go ahead and add it here if you're someone that hasn't touched the game and you're still waiting for December 1st like me. The lane roles are simple. You have an off lane, and that off lane is usually bruisers and or like tanky characters. It's a solo lane. The mid lane is for primarily casters. You're going to see Gideon solo lane. You're going to see Gadget, Howitzer. The right lane, or well, I say right lane, but the other lane, because it depends on what side you're on, is going to be the duo lane. You're going to have your carry and your support there. So you're going to see Murdoch, you're going to see Narbosh, Decker, Drongo, I think his name is. So yeah, you have your duo lane, and then your jungle is for junglers. So this is, bruisers, assassins, and tanks. So team composition, will depend on who your team is picking, but those are kind of just the general roles and the lane meta to kind of begin. And that's pretty much predetermined by the game, which I think is really solid because it kind of gives a solid foundation for the player base to build off of. All right, and last but not least is a 10, and this is lane management, knowing when to base and buy. So lane management, what I mean is really like your wave management. So if you're in lane and you have a lot of money, you have a lot of currency, you don't want to just stay there, because if your enemy comes back to lane, they probably died or went back to base and bought items. So now they're stronger than you. So it's important to know how to manage your waves and how to manage your lane. So if you do have a lot of money, don't be afraid to just hard push your lane. Throw a bunch of your mana at your abilities, try to really push, auto attack a lot, do whatever you're doing, swing your sword a lot, whatever lane you're in, and push that wave into the tower to force them to have to get the experience and the gold, so that way you can return to base and buy. And also, if you are in lane, say you don't have a lot of money and you don't need to buy, don't be afraid to, freeze the lane in the mid, auto attack it slowly, use your abilities slowly. You don't always have to be shoving the lane super fast, especially when you don't have vision. So don't be afraid to let the wave kind of pull back to your side and freeze the lane by last hitting very slowly and being methodical with when you're using your abilities. So lane management is going to take a little bit of nuance and like really understanding the flow of the game and even understanding the flow of your matchup. But sometimes it's best to, hard push your lane into their side, and sometimes it's best to keep it in the middle, and sometimes it's best to even let that wave come back toward your side and try to freeze it there. All right, friends, that is 10 things that I think will benefit you, that you should need to know, that you need to know going into Predecessor. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, drop a like on this video, subscribe to this channel, like I said, for future Predecessor content. Be sure to be kind to one another, tell someone you love them, and I'll see you on the next video.